Everyone loves a good story. Stories are a great way to connect with your customer on a personal level. In his article for Inc.com, Jeffrey James outlines a 7-step process on how to craft a great story. First, decide on the takeaway. You have to settle on just what you want your audience to believe when they're done hearing the story. This is really the goal of any story. Stories among friends may have only an entertainment takeaway, but most stories for business should have a well-defined takeaway. An example would be if, say, you were selling a security system, you might tell the story about how your system helped one of your customers. Next, we're going to pick the ending that will create the takeaway. According to Jeffrey, the most important part of any story is the ending because it makes the point you are trying to communicate. Using the same example as before, if you were selling a security system, you wouldn't want to end your story by telling your listener that your customer lost all of their belongings in a break-in. Next, we're going to begin with the who, what, where, and when, and add a hint of direction. Jeffrey says here is where most people falter when they're telling their story. These important details help to engage the listener and make the story relevant to them. This is also the time when you introduce your main character. It's important during this step of the story creation that you keep your takeaway in mind. The who, what, where, when, and direction should all support your takeaway. Next, we're going to intensify human interest by adding context. Here is where your story really comes alive. Don't just tell a story. Paint a picture with your words. Mark didn't just go to the store. Mark drove his beat-up 1978 Malibu into the dark parking lot to get some milk. It's really up to you how much you elaborate on the context of your story. Be sure not to add too much meaningless information. That tends to bog down your story. Make sure what you do add is relevant to the takeaway you are trying to convey. Next, we're going to describe the goals and obstacles. The lead in any story must have a goal that he or she needs to achieve, and the obstacles that they must overcome thicken the plot. They draw the listener in, making the story more personal to them. In our example from earlier, Mark needs milk. He can't have his midnight cereal snack without it. His obstacles would be that he has a junky car and the fact that it's dark outside and it's really late and he doesn't want to go to the store. Next, we're going to describe the decision that made the achievement possible. Jeffrey says that in every story, there is a turning point, a decision, that allows the characters to overcome the obstacle and achieve the goal. This is not the end of the story. The turning point is the decision that caused what happened to happen. And finally, we're going to provide the ending and highlight the takeaway. You end the story by telling how the goal was achieved. You want your listener to remember the takeaway. For a sales story, your hope is that the takeaway will motivate your listener to buy your product. You may not always be successful, but you want the seed planted for future consideration. The moral to this story is we may not all have been born great storytellers, but we all can learn to be one. Thank you for your time.